Welcome back to Your Average Witch, where every Tuesday we talk about witch life, witch stories, and sometimes a little witchcraft. In this episode, I'm talking to Cat Heath, a blogger who writes about elves, heathenry, and witchcraft. Cat tells us about why you should be careful when working with elves, explains why string is her favorite witchy tool, and introduces us to her experiments in witchcraft. Unfortunately, there were some audio issues in this episode, but you can follow along on the written transcript by going to youraveragewitch.buzzsprout.com. Now let's get to the stories. Hi, Kat. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Would you please introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what you do and where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. Oh my word. It's always one of those things with introductions, isn't it? Like, oh my god, I want to talk about myself. So I'm Cat Heath. I'm the author of Elves, Witches and Gods, Spinning Old Heathen Magic in the Modern Day. I also have a book out called Essays from the Crossroads under my blog name, Helrune. And I also write on the Helrune blog, which is SEOHELRUNE.com. And I'm also on Instagram under that name too, Helrune.
Awesome.
As what I do, my religion is Heathenry, but I also practice witchcraft. And my particular flavour of witchcraft is very much, you've got your kind of like dirt witch sort of thing and folk magic kind of thing going on. But then there's also a lot of weird experiments with historically tested forms of magic. So I'm always getting into a bit of trouble.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I also have never heard the term dirt witch, and I really like that.
It's something that my friends say. Like, I don't know if I qualify as a dirt witch, but I mean, I'm a little bit of a scumbag, and I kind of MacGyver a lot of stuff, so maybe it counts. Hopefully it counts.
Okay, I just got an instant crush on you when you called yourself a scumbag. Love it. What does it mean to you when you call yourself a witch? Do you call yourself a witch?
I do, yeah. It's one of the terms that I go by. It's probably the oldest term I've gone by. But for me, a witch is someone who is, you're kind of in between, right? You're not entirely of this world. You're not entirely of the other world. You're kind of in between, occupying a different space, really. And, involved in that, for me at least, there's a sense of responsibility there. And, I want to try and, how do I explain this? I want to be able to walk well between the worlds. I feel like I have a responsibility to act well with the different types of beings, the different types of peoples that I interact with. And also, like, a huge part of being a witch for me is, people coming to me and saying, hey, I have this issue with something unseen. Can you come and help me out with it? And, that's kind of a huge part of it for me as well. So, yeah, it's a very animist view. It's very much based in relationship. And yeah, I guess that's it for me.
I don't know what it is. Lately, it seems like everybody I ask on the show is animist. And I know not everybody is, but everybody I'm talking to lately is.
You've just fallen in the animist hole, haven't you? Really?
I guess.
Just gotten sucked in, and before you know it, you're going to be like, one of us.
Oh, I am one of us.
Not, see, there you go.
It's just interesting.
So cookies. It is interesting though, isn't it? And it's good to see that, more people are becoming interested in animism and also aiming to get a deeper understanding of what animism is beyond this really simplistic view of, well, everything's got a soul in it, and then arguing about, well, does my chair have a soul? So, it's really good to see people expanding that knowledge and deepening that knowledge. And, yeah, it rocks. I think it's very necessary too, given the times that we live in.
I think it helps kindness spread because, yeah, okay, your kid's beating up its stuffed animal. Cool, it's just a stuffed animal. But you can still teach a little bit of, well, maybe you don't have to beat the crap out of that thing. Just love it. That's a very simplistic view, I know, but I just thought about being a little kid and thinking, oh, I can't do that. That's mean.
Yeah. And you kind of have to, like, with children as well. Even though there's more nuance to a regular situation in life, with a kid, you can't really be that nuanced until they get older. So it is best to kind of take that, okay, right, how would you feel if that was you? You kind of have to try to teach them that compassion.
Do you have any family history with witchcraft?
Ooh, not witchcraft per se. I'm from a really weird family. Have you ever heard of spiritualism? Like the religion, the one that came up in the 1800s in
No.
upstate New York. Okay, so a way to describe spiritualism is necromancy with optional Jesus.
Okay.
And it started in the 1800s with these girls, and they started hearing these knocking sounds, and we started to communicate with them. I mean, it's a lot more complicated, the story, but I can't remember it all right now. And basically, they started this whole thing where they're like, dude, we can communicate with dead people. And then that became the entire point of spiritualism. And at some point, Spiritism split off and they got an actual doctrine. But now spiritualism is a very nebulous term. And some branches of spiritualism incorporate theosophy. Other branches are more explicitly Christian. My family has been involved in spiritualism for like 3 generations before I was born. And so I grew up with my dad doing things like going into trances, telling people what sickness they had, laying his hands on them, or just like praying for them. I've seen his face completely change and his voice completely change. And we just had really weird things happening all the time when I was a kid. There was always something going on, and my dad was always kind of pulling me aside randomly and teaching me little bits like how to feel energy, how to manipulate energy, how to what was the other thing he taught? He used to test me on psychometry as well. It was very odd. But basically, my life had gotten crazy by the time I was 13, and I'd already been kind of like wishing for things to happen at school, like really wishing very hard. And I realized that I could create changes by doing that. And then when I was like 13 or so, the situation with the ghosts and the hauntings in my house had gotten so ridiculous. And spiritualism doesn't really have good tools for, hey, we need a boundary here. This is stupid. So I started looking at books on witchcraft in the library and found some tools, and that's how I got into it, really. And then after that, I started hiking on the moors, and, well, I was hiking on the moors anyway, but I started to see the local moorland as being kind of like a big place for practice and learning, and really kind of coming to understand the unseen layers of the landscape and the different other than human beings that live there and building those relationships. So that's been going on since back then, like 13.
That is so interesting. I can't believe I've never heard of it.
What, spiritualism? Oh,
Yeah.
It's wild. It is absolutely wild. Some of the times I tell people what I grew up with, I'll think, oh yeah, it's dead normal. And then people will be talking, and they're talking about spiritualism as like an academic subject. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I grew up with that. Like, this is actually what they do. And then they're like, wait, what?
Huh.
Yeah, it's really random. And what's really bizarre is that, obviously with my accent, I'm not from over in the States. I live here now, and I'm a US citizen, but I'm originally from Lancashire in northwest England. And what's interesting is that spiritualism originated in the States. And my family must have gotten into it pretty early for it to go back 3 generations when it emerged in the 1840s and 1850s. And what's really weird about my dad's family is that you actually had 2 different families of spiritualists intermarrying at one point, too, which is how you got my granddad. And there were people who were known even before they got into spiritualism for stuff like working with energy and like, healing people and just knowing things. So it's, this is stuff that my cousins told me, like my cousin did a bit of research into the family history on it. She's really into the spiritualist side of things. So she did some research on it, and she told me all this stuff, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
I don't even feel like I'm doing an interview. I feel like I'm like listening to a podcast that someone else is doing about this.
Oh, I can matter, that's for sure.
Okay, I gotta bring myself back here. What, do you have any daily practices that you do, or if not daily, consistent ones?
Well, I try for daily, but you know how life is, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, right? Like you start out as a teen and you're like, yeah, I'm doing good at this daily thing, and then, life gets more complex and you're like, oh man, I feel guilty. I do try to do regular offerings to my gods and my allies, because for me, especially the kind of work I end up doing, if I'm getting called to help people with some sketchy stuff, or I'm doing experiments with sketchy stuff, my first line of defense is my alliances with, the holy powers I worship and my allies. So that's a huge thing. And also, I'm a really big believer in not just offering when you want something. There's nothing worse than a friend who just gives you stuff because he wants something. So I try to be more like, hey, I appreciate you, Like, so I try to do regular offerings, and they just tend to be very simple incense usually, and that's not traditional for heathenry, but the gods they've indicated to me that's cool with them, and it's showed in our luck. We've had better luck when I started doing that more regularly. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep on doing that. Aside from that, there's meditation. I do meditation quite a bit. It's actually part of my treatment plan for ADHD. So meditation is a really huge part of my wellness in general. But in addition to that, it's also part of my magical work too. I do a practice called Heathen Soul Lore, and a lot of how I work with my different souls is through meditative practices. So those are my two main consistent regular practices, offerings and meditations. Oh, and just practicing basic skills. We think about things like grounding, centering, shielding as, oh, this is what the newbies learn, but you really have to do it throughout your life. There's never a point where you leave those so-called basic skills behind. So, I always try to keep on top of those as well.
Yeah, if you're building a wall, you still need the bottom bricks.
Yeah. And I don't know, I kind of come across people who, they'll forget to practice for years. And then they're like, something happens, and they're like, I can't believe this happened. And I'm like, yeah, but you haven't been practicing. It's like a muscle.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it up. It may say basic in the book. Like, you may have encountered it as a basic exercise, but it's really more foundational versus basic. And like you said, you need those foundation bricks for the wall to stand. So that could do with a good reframe, couldn't it, really? Like a different framing, so more people understand that from the outset.
What was it you said? Heathen...
My religion's... Oh, Heathen Soul Lore.
Soul Lore?
Yeah.
L-O-R-E?
L-O-R-E. Yeah.
Okay.
I can link to the website. It's this website by this heathen lady called Winifred Rose, and she's been researching heathen period ideas about souls for like 20 years now, and all her work is on there, plus exercises, because she's also been working with the souls for the past 20 years, and I'm in her study group as well. So it's honestly been life-changing getting involved in that. It's just been absolutely incredible. Very, very healing. It's changed a lot of how I practice, how I conceptualize how magic works as well. So if it kind of calls to you, I definitely recommend it.
I'm super interested. What are we? Not even barely 15 minutes in, and I'm already I want to be your friend.
Hey, friend me on Facebook.
Would you say witchcraft has changed your life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me was, having those tools from early on. It was a way to go from being terrified all the time to, sort of like retaking my own agency. Because there was a point when I was a teenager when things were sort of mounting up so much with the different experiences I was having. Because, if you're a kid and you see stuff, you're not always seeing nice stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, when your parents don't necessarily understand because they don't see, like my dad will sense things and he gets taken over by his guide, but he's never seen them. He's never seen the dead. He's never seen different spirits. He's never had that experience. So, he works completely differently to me. And I think it was very difficult for him to understand just how terrifying it is to be as a kid and having these unexplainable things happening in your room at night and not really being able to tell anyone about it. And witchcraft for me, it gave me a feeling like, okay, I don't just have to deal with this. I can put up those boundaries. I can also become an active participant here and interact. And as time has gone by, I've used witchcraft to, sort of like create changes in the direction of my life as well. So, for example, before the job came up for me to move to Korea, because I used to live in South Korea, I did a stitched piece of magic. I do a lot of the fiber, so knitting, spinning, embroidery kind of magic. I did an embroidered piece of magic, basically with binding on it, and then a charm outlining, laying out everything I wanted to happen. I basically consecrated it. I set it down as a layer magically, and then within 3 months, I moved to South Korea. I had a job that was fun. It's one of my specifications. It paid well, and I ended up finding the love of my life, and so I ended up marrying my husband. And he's
That
also
is neat.
heathen. He's also heathen as well.
That's extra wild.
What are the chances of finding a heathen in South Korea?
I don't do math, so I couldn't tell you.
As far as I knew at the time, there were like 3 to 4 heathens that I knew about on the Korean peninsula. Obviously, I don't know whether there were any Koreans who were who were there who were getting into heathenry. But in the English-speaking community, that was it. And my husband comes from New Hampshire. I'm from Lancashire. Somehow we met in South Korea, and we were both heathens, and we hit it off. Witchcraft has really changed my life.
You just gave me. I'm a metal worker, and you just gave me so many brain explosions about things that I should try.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be so cool.
I'm excited.
All those different layers of sort of ritual actions and incantations you could put in with metalworking.
Yeah, and when I have to quench the metal, I can get some moon water. Oh my gosh! My gosh!
I mean, when you think tangent here, okay, prepare yourself as a tangent.
I love a tangent.
Love a good tangent. So, one of the really cool I'm really fascinated by Viking Age funerary culture. There's a random interest for you there, because necromancy. And one of the really neat things that you learn when you're kind of studying this is that it's possible that when a lot of the blacksmiths had their forges on the grave fields, right? There was this thing in some places where the blacksmiths would be forging on the grave fields. And there's been experiments in, experimental archaeology thing that have shown that it's possible to use human bones to carbonize metal in the smithing process. Imagine that. Here's a sword, it's full of ghosts.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
Holy crap.
So just think about the possibilities there, and then the whole idea of creation, the Norse creation myth. You've got fire and ice, right? And sort of things coming together with those two elements. It's alchemic. I don't say alchemical because that's completely different.
My
But
brain is
it's
doing things.
so awesome. It is so awesome. There's so much you can do with it.
My brain is doing so many things.
You're
Cartwheels.
getting all the ideas now, right?
Gymnastics. Inside my head. Simone Biles is in my head.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad I could send you off on a really good tangent there.
Not 2 weeks ago. Maybe it was 2. I don't know. I can't do math. Even in time. I don't know. Recently, this year, I interviewed a blacksmith who does workshops where he teaches you to build a forge.
Oh.
And I'm thinking, hey, I want to go do that class. And now this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's a sign.
This year is I'm getting chills. This is bizarre.
Year of the blacksmithing. Year of the blacksmithing. Heck yes.
Okay, I need to chill out. We need to ask you questions. And it's not, I swear, I am not usually like this.
It's fine.
I feel like I've had about 40 things of caffeine. What would you say is the biggest motivator in your practice?
Honestly, I love that sense of connection. You know, when you're in a ritual and everything's going well, and you're just kind of you feel like you're plugged in. It's almost like you're a weather vane, and you're just kind of moving in the right direction with the wind. I don't know if that makes sense or not. There's a dance, and you're in full flow. Yeah, I love that. That is getting to that space, and also discovering things, different ways of working that maybe haven't been done for 1,000 years, or maybe it's something that's being revealed right now, but it works really well. You know, these are both huge motivators for me. You know, that sense of connectedness, and then also, you know, the element of discovery. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you ever feel like you have imposter syndrome, or that? Do you ever feel like that? If you do, what do you do about it?
Oh my God, I think everybody does though, don't we? You know, anyone. I do. I fully admit to that. When I was younger, I used to. It used to take a different form as well. In things would happen, and I would convince myself I was mentally ill instead of things happening, and then other people would be like, "Oh no, I experienced that too." I'm like, "No, shut up. It's easier if it's mental illness." It's never easier if it's mental illness. Side note, but no,
this comes up so often.
But I think it's kind of related. I think those two things are related. And so, when it comes to self-doubt and imposter syndrome, now it's more I know this stuff's real. It's been proven to me beyond a shadow of a doubt. But will it happen the same way again? Will the spirits listen to me? Will this happen as it did last time? Can I replicate this experiment? If this person comes to me with a problem, will I know how to help them? So that's the kind of thing I experience, and really the only way to get through it I found is to just suck it up and do the best you can. And then this is a really awesome tip from Lee Morgan. I don't know if you've ever read his work, but Lee Morgan, I think it's Standing Not Falling, he recommends that people write a list of their magical wins. Whenever you do magic and it comes out and it comes out how you want it to, you write it down. You put it in your grimoire, your book of shadows, your working journal, and you just when you're feeling it, you look through it. You look through that list.
And I don't have it written down, but I do have specific memories that I look to when I'm thinking, what am I even doing? Okay, well I had this result.
Yeah.
I've seen this happen. I've seen it.
Yeah.
But you actually get into the proving the theory. That's
interesting. I do, and I also kind of get into this whole thing where I'll come up with an experimental way of working, and I'll test it out, and I'll get other people to test it out as well, or I'll do it with other people to see what they experience while we're kind of redoing the thing that I've come up with, the experiment, and we all kind of compare notes for the different effects. Okay, there was a cold wind at this point. I felt like I was being touched at this point. This is when the atmosphere changed, the floor went cold. We kind of compare different notes in that way. And that's a really, it's terrifying, but it's also really validating too. It's kind of like biting the bullet.
I don't want things to touch me. My husband has had things touch him. I'm not interested. Please don't.
It doesn't bug me as much as it used to. I think I'm just desensitized to it all.
I don't even like people touching me, though.
Well, that's legit, though. Humans are dirty. If there's one thing that COVID taught, I think, everyone, it's that
oh my gosh,
so many people consider washing hands optional.
I wish it had taught everyone, but I get your point.
I know. It's funny, I was in the kitchen yesterday, just kind of like putting dinner together for like the guests that would come in, and my husband got this Ancestry DNA testing kit, and he's there trying to fill this test tube with spit. And I was like, are you kidding me? What the hell is with this era? If we're not shoving these like Q-tips up our noses to scrape mucus out to test for the plague, we're spitting into test tubes to see what Heinz variety of like people we come from. Like, it's gross.
Yeah, I'm not fond of bodily fluids.
I'm just like, get out of the kitchen and do it somewhere else.
Oh no, he was doing. Oh no.
He was stood like this, like he was just stood there, and he's making this ridiculous noise because there's this little funnel on top of the test tube, and it kind of sounds like if you ever been around a trumpet player and they take the mouthpiece off and they just blow it with that rest of the trumpet attached to it, that kind of weird raspberry noise, it was making that noise. And I'm just like, you better not be hocking up Lugers in there, alright? That's
oh no.
That's gross. Go somewhere else, will you? So yeah, I don't mind being touched by non-corporeal things nearly as much as other humans, honestly. At least non-corporeal things don't have like bodily fluids.
Give you the clap.
The clap, or the Rona, or RSV, or what else is floating around.
Gross. Oh, no thank you.
Oh, yeah. Scabies. Really scraping the barrel of traumas here, aren't we? My word.
What would you say is your biggest struggle with your practice?
Oh, my biggest struggle is time and not being exhausted. I dream about...
I do know.
I have all these awesome ideas for experiments. There's been this one thing I've been experimenting with for a couple of years now, really. And it's based on this Swedish archaeology site that I took a look at, and I'm like, oh, yo, that is necromantic as hell. And then I realised it matches a description of a necromantic grid from the sagas. So I was like, all right, how do I work with this bad boy? Okay, I don't actually know what it will do. So I had this rule because, growing up as I did with all these scary things happening, I don't want to subject my kid to that. So I'm very, very careful about what I bring into the house and how the different layers I build into my experiments to protect everyone around me, basically. So because I had no idea what would happen with this grid, I then had to look into scheduling some time away. My husband's just taking over, and we disappearing off into the mountains of West Virginia with some friends, just to crack out this painted grid on a home despot drop cloth to try to see what kind of necromancy nonsense I could get going on. And the end of that story is that we ended up haunting the hell out of this Airbnb. So, but yeah, that stuff like that takes time to put together. And I don't always have the time. There's always childcare that you need, or just in a day, just day to day, finding the time to do your regular practices, or, when there's a festival or a high holy day that comes up and you're just so dog tired.
Mm-hmm.
And, sure, people are like, well, you just got to suck it up. But if it involves a trance work component, then I'm always like, can I stay in trance, or am I going to fall asleep? Is this going to be dangerous, ultimately? Am I going to be compos mentis? Or should I just go and, approach my allies and say, hey, I can't do it today, but can we kind of, change the plan up a little bit? you know, I those are my biggest challenges. Time in everyday life, time to get the hell away to go do weird experiments that may or may not land a place getting haunted, and you know, being exhausted.
Yes. Adulthood.
Right?
So overrated.
It is so overrated.
What brings you the most joy in your practice?
Um, Probably the connectedness, the sort of like peaks of reality that you get. You know, like when I when a ritual goes well, and you know, like doing the kind of work I do with these experiments. I mean, not everything I do is an experiment. Some stuff is just like set. I've been doing it for years. But there's sometimes a moment, if I'm doing it right, or if I'm just like making an idiot out of myself, like some being will feel sorry for me and step in and give me a few hints. That gives me a lot of joy. Because it's like, okay, I've managed to make contact. And sure, it wasn't because I was doing everything right, necessarily. It was because they were like, oh, this person, this human, is doing the equivalent of a crappy kid drawing that we're going to put on the fridge to make them feel better about their efforts. And so let's give them a hand. Or, you know, if I'm doing better, they're like, hey, yeah, they're almost there. Let's give them the rest of it. So, you know, because we want more people doing this. We want more humans doing this. So that kind of like connecting and that exchange of information and just that peek behind the curtain of what's there, what exists, and that, you know, we humans aren't the only beings with sentience and agency. We're not the only people, essentially. And I'm not just talking about the unseen either. You know, I've seen some really, really amazing things happen with plants, trees, animals, birds. I just love those. That gives me that glimpse of that wider reality. It gives me. It is a delight. You know, it is the high.
So you'd feel like they do want us to do things?
Oh
To
heck yeah,
interact?
yeah, yeah. Not all of them. Not all of them. Some of them are just like get the hell out, stupid human. You know. But I think that there are some who do. You've just got to, you know, you just got to kind of
Get their
be
attention,
careful.
probably.
Yeah, you've got to be careful. You've got to get their attention. And this is one of the reasons why I work with, you know, I kind of take my cues from these historical forms of magic, because I figure, you know, if what I've found is that there are certain beings that seem to be connected to different magical practices. From like, there's been different beings that have shown up for different magical practices and kind of given me hints, and they seem to be connected to them in some way. And so, like, a working theory I have right now is that, you know, by experimenting with these, I'm trying to hit up beings who do want to work with humans. You know, I'm trying to make contact with the ones who do. It's like a more sure path, if you know what I mean, rather than going looking for ones who are just like, no, get the hell out, human. You know, because it isn't safe. It is a dangerous thing. You know, I'm sure Morgan was. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but I'm sure Morgan was very clear about that. Um, so yeah, it's yeah, you do have to, and it also depends on who your allies are. I've found, you know, like I work with the Alpha, like which is the Old English word for elves, and I use that term specifically because the Alpha that you find in the Old English sources, they are kind of a little bit like fairies, but also like the Alpha that you find in the Old Norse sources too. And that word really kind of epitomizes the group of alpha that I work with. And so a lot of the things I do, a lot of the different allies that I interact with, and the different beings that crop up and who seem to want me to, you know, get this information out there and get these practices out there. You know, they're related to that, and so it's kind of like a friend of a friend sort of deal. Only I'm not so much of a friend as like a lackey. So I don't know if that made any sense. I just rambled a whole lot.
I don't actually process anything during an interview. Most of the time, I do my processing when I'm editing.
But I can see that.
What would you say is the biggest fear in witchcraft?
I don't know. All the things I used to consider biggest fears are not so much. I think like losing that connection would be it. You know?
Yeah, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah. If you get into the heathen soul lore, one of the things that you start to realize as you look through it and you work through it is that the heathen soul lore has this. The idea is that you have multiple souls. We're all people in and of all persons with agency themselves and different afterlife destinies and stuff. And the more I look into historical sources with regards to these souls, some of them, like things like baptism, seem to harm them and their ability to connect. So it can definitely happen, and I really that sounds like hell to me, losing that connection. So I wouldn't swap it for the world, even if it does sometimes lead me into pants-shittingly terrifying situations.
It never even occurred to me to think about losing it, and now that's my new biggest fear.
Welcome to the new horror.
Thanks.
You're welcome. My brain is full of stuff like this.
Love it.
It's like if a demon ever possessed me, I'd be like, God, why am I in here?
Yeah, basically. Good luck with that, guy.
Good luck with that, bro.
It hurts in here.
It's not fun in here. Yeah, basically. I terrified. Well, I kind of disturbed a whole bunch of my friends on Facebook because the new AI arts thing. Well, I say new; it's been happening for a while now. But there was this children's book that this guy on Twitter put out, and he did it all using AI. But when you zoomed in on the pictures, these allegedly cute pictures of these children, all the hands were messed up and the fingers looked like they were broken and stuff. And so I was thinking about that, and naturally my brain takes it to the worst possible place. And so I go on I go on Facebook because I have to obviously share this nonsense and mess. Because if it's infecting my brain, people can have it too.
You gotta spread it.
Right? So I was like, hey, I was just thinking about these AI things and the pictures with the fingers, and could you imagine, I got thinking about a short story, like a plot hook for a short story, and how in a not too distant future, children became convinced that that's how their hands are supposed to look. And so children started maiming themselves and demanding, surgery to allegedly correct their fingers because they've been watching these, looking at these AI images for so long. And people would just post comments going, oh my God, effing hell, Cat, what the heck?
Thanks, I hate it.
They're like, I thought I had some bad thoughts about this whole thing, but no, that wins. Yeah, that's why I write.
But you should write it.
I don't want to write that. I've got 3.
Too many books in there.
Well, I have a fiction book that's currently going through its final edits, and that is a hellscape, emotional hellscape. Then there's the second book in that series that I'm starting the preliminary edits for. I have the third book in that series that needs editing. I'm halfway through writing the fourth book in that series. Plus, I also have another book, and I've been down the hole writing my next Heathen book. So I'm kind of a little bit busy. I have to say no. These books are kind of like do you knit? If you knit, you'll understand what I mean. Where you just keep buying yarn because you're like, oh my God, I can make this with it. But then you never get around to making it all.
I do that with stones.
Oh, right. So, what are you going to do with all these stones? I have no idea. So I'm kind of cutting
I
myself
look at them.
off. I'm kind of cutting myself off until I've finished and pitched a few more books and got them in the editing pipeline. And I honestly
Good
don't want
plan.
to write about children mutilating themselves either.
Yeah,
I,
actually, yeah, because if you actually
children
have
and animals
children,
are
I
my
would
cut
not want
off.
to do that.
Children and animals are my cut off. I can't. Like I can write horror, like most horrendous things happening to adults, but not children and animals. And it's the same with watching it on TV. I can't watch horror movies where kids or animals get hurt. That scene in I Am Legend where the dog dies, I'm just
Oh
like,
my
no,
gosh.
no, I want to leave this theatre now. No, F
Yeah,
this
I can't.
movie. I want to get out of here. my husband, who was then my boyfriend, was like, wait, what? No, I want out. I am done with this. Kill the dog.
Yeah, John Wick was the one that got me.
It's just
I was like,
vulnerable.
I'm angry. How dare
Same
you,
with
Keanu
vulnerable
Reeves, be in a
adults.
movie like this?
Or any vulnerable people. I don't like storylines involving any kind of vulnerable, people of any kind, whether they're like
Yeah,
the dogs, cats, children,
seniors.
or seniors, or adults with disabilities. I don't want. It upsets me. And I used to work with adults with disabilities, or disabled adults. It's when I worked back then, it was person first language, so I had to kind of adjust. So disabled adults. So I used to work with a whole bunch of like about 5 disabled adults, and they were awesome. They were such lovely people, but they're so they're so vulnerable, and without people other people looking out for them, they're going to get manipulated. They can wind up in all kinds of horrible situations, and
Hmm.
yeah,
I was
just
an occupational therapy assistant, so I worked
oh
with a variety of vulnerable people too.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
changes the way you look at things.
it really does. It really does because people who haven't worked with vulnerable people, they they only see like the sort of cosmetic, like surface level. One of my clients, she was this lady in a wheelchair, and she had like this high degree of spasticity in the limbs, and so she was very stiff at all times, and she shook, and she had to be spoon fed, and we had to do safe swallowing training so that we could feed her safely, so we didn't hurt her,
Hmm.
and we take her out to restaurants and stuff because why the hell not? She's an adult; she should get to go like eat in a restaurant like a regular person. So we take her to restaurants, and we actually got asked to leave once because another customer had made a complaint saying that watching our client eating was making him feel sick. Like, just turn your head, dude.
Yeah,
Just
or
leave
leave.
her be. She's just trying to eat her lunch, which is a right that everyone should have. So yeah,
That's
that
incredibly obnoxious.
it is, isn't it? It is. So I always think about stuff like that, but that guy couldn't see anything beyond how she looked. He didn't see the struggles that she had. He didn't see that, this was a person who her life had become so limited relatively quickly and was dealing with really severe medical problems. But somehow she always managed to have a smile over stuff, like you sang songs to her and she would try to sing along with you, even though she couldn't move her mouth properly anymore. And she'd get this big smile on her face. And I always wonder how I never met her before she kind of went into a decline. And I always wondered how she was before that. And I think she was probably one of the strongest people ever because she managed to kind of have that joy still, even though, and I know you can argue that, oh, she probably wasn't aware of it, but I don't think so. I don't believe that. I think,
That's what
I,
people tell themselves.
I
So it's
think so
easier to
too.
live
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. That's what I feel like too. So I think she was one of the strongest people I've ever met, but people would never really recognize that because all they saw was, this lady in a wheelchair who made strange noises when she ate and had to have the food thickened, and then it made the food look gross to them, and that's all they saw.
Well, they're miserable people.
They are miserable people. And that's a really sad note. I'm sorry.
I actually cried.
I'm sorry.
I cry all the time, so it's okay.
I was very sad when I found out that she passed. She passed when I lived in Germany, and I had a dream the night that she passed about her. This guy. I was working at the place again. This guy knocked at the door. He's wearing a black suit, and he was filling out transfer paperwork. And I just had this feeling that no, we'll never see her again. And I'm begging my boss, you can't let him complete that paperwork. You can't let him take her. By the end of the dream, they got into his car, but the more he wrote, the more her different sort of physical issues sort of lightened. And by the end of it, she was walking out the door and sort of grabbing at everyone, because that's something she always did anyway. And really in everyone's faces, and she was clinging to this guy all happy. And I watched him drive off in this VW Beetle through these woods that kind of opened to a little road for him to go. And the next day, I'm getting emotional now. The next day, my mum messaged me and
I'm
said,
going to cry even harder.
If you cry, then I'll cry and we'll all cry. The next day, my mum messaged me and said that she'd passed that night. And I was like, oh.
That actually makes me feel better, though. Yeah,
because it's I know she went to a good place. I know she was happy going,
That's, wow.
And the guy in the suit was not unkind. He just had a job to do. And he was smiling and kind of talking to her and stuff.
Oh, I'm thinking about my patients.
Yeah, so leave that in. It might give someone some kind of comfort. Like being a folk person.
After all that, what would you say is your favorite tool and why?
Ooh, I don't know. I hate trying to pick one thing.
It doesn't have to be a physical object, by the way.
Oh, I make it even worse now. So at the moment, I have some perennials. So my perennial favorite tool is probably string. Yeah, because you can use it. Well, you can use it for knot spells. You can use it to MacGyver other tools. If you're out and about and you need something that you don't already have. And if you have a spindle, you can spin it to purpose. String is a really good practical thing to have.
That's such a good one.
I always put it in my go bags because I make magical go bags, and I have a main one. If somebody calls and is like, "Hey, Cat, we need help. Can you come round?" Then I'll pick my main one up and I'll head up door with that. But I always have some kind of supplies in my bag anyway, regardless which bag I've got. My basics is black salt, protection oil, cord, that string thing, that I made ritualistically with flax that I spun and chanted over and whatnot, a holy stone or a hagstone, and some small offering substances like cornmeal, sometimes butter if I can find the little plastic packs. The alcohol minis, they're also really good for offerings depending on who you're working with. Coins, they're really good for the dead. Aside from that, and I don't know if I can really call it a tool, so this grid, I keep talking about this necromantic grid.
Uh-huh.
I got a pop-up tent because one of the spirits that I kind of got the attention of colliding around this grid told me is that it needs to be covered over. It's more like a mound. It needs more mound-like. So I did an experiment. I did a couple of experiments. So having a pillow fort over it kind of thing, which was a disaster because my cat decided she had to get in there. So that was fun. And then when you've got chairs falling and stuff, and you're oh my god. So I invested in this $30 pop-up beach tent and I drew the grid inside, and it's literally this thing that you pull out the bag and you throw, and it's up in 3 seconds.
I love those.
So it's like 3, 2, 1, necromancy, go!
Magic.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fully set up at that point, but at least I've got my kind of like mound and grid up, and then once I've got that up, I can do the sort of like space delineation, the chanting as I'm like hallowing the area and all that kind of business. So it's just a really good way of getting started. It doesn't take forever and doesn't require complicated logistics that cats might mess up. So yeah, I love it. Just like the whole thing where I can pull this thing out and be like, woo, fa-dunk.
Nobody has ever mentioned those butter packets, and that is such a good idea.
I'm surprised Morgan didn't. Oh my god.
I don't think I asked her this question. I don't
they're
remember.
Like the Monica
She had different questions than you have.
Oh well, they're like the Monica butter packets. I've never seen anyone use them so liberally in their practice. And I know this because I went to Morgan and I got employed as for witchcraft purposes and also to present workshops for this tour in Iceland. Going to these weird places and like running rituals and stuff. So I've seen Morgan in action a fair bit now, and yeah, they make good use of the butter.
That is so neat. She did actually tell a story from that trip.
Ooh, which one? Which one?
The troll party at night that you almost walked into?
Yeah. Nope, not the best idea I've ever had.
I would have been walking up. I would have disappeared too.
It made me laugh because usually when I come up with these ideas, like, hey, yeah, let's go up It's Hill at night. Usually when I'm like that, people are like, no, come on, what the hell are you doing? Morgan was just like, give me a minute, I'll go get my pants on.
Yep,
I'm like, all right, rock on.
She said that, and I was like, me too. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it was. I was just like, oh, hell yeah, I have found my people here. They're as wild as I am. So yeah, that was good times.
If you could only recommend one book to a new witch, what would it be?
Probably Althea Sebastiani's spellcraft book. She is the only person, and this might be because I haven't read enough of like the new books, like the new person books for a while, but I was really impressed with Althea Sebastiani's book because I rarely see people teaching how to sense and manipulate energy. And I think that's a feature of witchcraft as opposed to other forms of magic. One of the main features of witchcraft as opposed to other forms of magic. And she actually teaches people how to do that. And the way that she structures it is it's a practical course that takes place over, I think, 2 months. And she gets them doing different activities in accordance with the moon while also teaching them sort of like theory behind how spellcraft and magic works. And so, yeah, I definitely recommend that. I keep meaning to finish reading Irene Glass's Magpie training witchcraft course. Begin witchcraft course. I know Irene, she's absolutely wonderful, a really, really excellent witch. I haven't finished reading her book yet because of the stuff I do, I'm always researching, so finding time for leisure reading, or if I am leisure reading that isn't just trashy novels, is really difficult. I love me some shifter novels, like these werewolf novels. I love me those. I love me just there's a series. No, I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, yeah.
I have a friend who writes those, actually.
That's the kind of books I write. I have such joy, like, subverting the usual werewolf tropes. It's like the whole point. Yeah, no, either Althea, I know you said one, but Althea Sebastiani's, and I would also probably say Irene Glass's and Kane Dreamwalker's book, because they co-wrote it, but I know Irene personally, absolutely excellent witch, really, really, really well respected community leader in this area too. Yeah, can't say enough good about her. Totally
Nice.
trust beginners in her hands.
Nice.
And I've heard really good stuff about her courses too, because she also teaches courses online.
I do love some online course. I'm actually in Althea Sebastiani's Feral Witchcraft course
I
right
love her
now.
work.
Me too. Did you see how she's posting, like, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, because Instagram is weird about how it shows you things, about how you have to actually be practicing and you have to be studying and you have to be working.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing the work, you're not a witch.
Yeah, no, but that's one of the hard lines I really appreciate about her. And I think that's like the sort of central message that she kind of but she hammers in again and again and again in her book about spellcraft. So yeah, definitely recommend her book. And it was one of those books where have you ever read picked up a magic book or a book about witchcraft or like any kind of magic really, and you start reading it, and the sort of energy in you kind of recognizes what the other person's putting down, and it starts like responding. Like you get like your hands start buzzing just reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
I get that with her book. That's usually a sign I'm onto good shit. So yeah, it's like, hey, idiot, read this. So,
What's something you wish was discussed more in the witch community?
Anthropocentrism. This sounds really like out of left field, or like I see it all the time. Like people, and this goes back to like the animist perspective as well. Like I see a lot of people expressing sentiments that are very much along the lines of this. The spirit is doing this for me for my spiritual growth, or like whatever. Like or kind of like talking down about the the different types of other human people you're interacting with, when it's like, no, they've got agency, and you need to kind of decenter yourself from this whole thing, because you're not seeing the situation how it actually is, for one, and two, you're disrespecting any other human people you're working with. And this is what we see especially in some of the discourse about familiars. This whole idea of like, my pet is the familiar, or like this idea that the witch is in charge of a familiar. And that's never traditionally been the case. Traditionally, it was the familiar who was the source of the witch's learning and power. The familiar existed in a hierarchy within their own people, and then the witch existed within that hierarchy through their connection to the familiar, even lower than the familiar. So, just this idea that everything exists for humans, I think that kind of needs to be talked about more. And aside from that, probably like sort of purification practices, I think, and this could just be because of the kind of stuff I get into, but purification is a huge part of what I do. I live in a pretty active area. Energy kind of goes up and down around here. It's to a point now where I've seen my neighbour literally put circles of salt around her and her mum's cars. This is just the kind of weird stuff that goes on around here. During 2020, the street was full of shadow people.
I don't like that.
It was right before we had all these like deaths from COVID. As we got hit really badly, they had to open up a local ice skating rink to store bodies because they ran out of space. Oh yeah, it was horrible. And it's kind of just sort of progressively gotten weirder since then. Really, we had this mimic spirit show up, and it kind of
hate that. Hate it.
Yeah, it kind of bounces between the houses a little bit. They'll come. It's been in my house a few times, and it's kind of given itself away pretty quickly because it pretends to be my husband, and then I've been like, haha, he's not even in the house, dipshit, get out. But my neighbour, her mum is terrified of this thing. She's really, really terrified, and that's the worst thing you can do with a mimic. They feed off that. It's like catnip to them. And so, like, she gets really terrified. She ends up calling the priest in, and it's a whole thing then.
The police?
The priest.
Oh.
No, we have exorcisms next door.
Okay.
So, stuff like that going on around here, and it's all because, like, the energy around here just kind of, like, there's, like, these tides almost. It gets higher, it gets lower. And if I don't purify regularly, I'll find myself getting more migraines. I'll find myself even more hyperactive than usual. I'll find that, my heart starts racing, that I find it even harder to sleep. And, if I don't stay on top of that, it's a whole thing. So, I think there needs to be more discussion about purification and the physical effects of energy on the body. Like what this kind of work can do to you physically, and how to also mitigate the effects. What herbs you can take to support different parts of your, I don't want to sound essentially hippy-dippy, but like energetic system, like your sort of subtle body. So what herbs you can take to help support your magical practice and, help it to handle the energy that you're working with. So.
Who or what would you say are the 3 biggest influences on your practice?
Oh, probably the moors, honestly. I spent years up there. Some weeks I would walk 60 to 70 miles a week, and it was often just me. It was often just me up there with my backpack, or me and my dog, and we'd just wander. And I came to know a set of different sites where, the spirits at those sites, the beings that live there, were amenable to having a gifting relationship. And, I think that was one of the biggest, some of the best training you can have as a witch, honestly. And back then in the 90s, the advice was get a good pair of hiking boots and walk a 5-mile radius. A lot of books I read back then seemed to all say that. So, I really took it to heart because I was hiking anyway. And so that's one of the influences on my practice, just that time spent out in the wilds. For me, that has influenced the way I think about supplies, to how to work on the go, how to kind of use your smarts instead of your strength to kind of solve problems or like any kind of issues that crop up. A lot of people when they go out into the wilds, they think in terms of, you've probably seen that meme, a witch should be the most terrifying thing in the woods, right?
Well,
it's like,
no,
okay. It doesn't work like that. It's like, if you actually think that you've either never experienced any being bigger than you, or you've stayed at home, like you're either too small for them to bother with, or you've just stayed home. There are beings out there that are way bigger than us, and that, there's a reason why the risks have traditionally always been dead, mad, or a poet. So, like when you get out there and you're working in those, like doing that kind of wild witchcraft, you quickly learn that you're not all that in a sack of spuds, really. That if you're gonna kind of get out of some situations, you have to learn how to improvise and work on the fly, and just like use your nous, use your smarts. And if you look at folklore, that's whenever humans come out on top, it's because they've used their smarts. It's not like this power fantasy of like, die with a gun, shooting the aliens, pew pew. It's not like that, and I think that's excellent training for that kind of practice, just getting out there. So that's one of the biggest influences on me. Another of the biggest influences is the elves. I know people think about, Santa's little helpers, but no, elves are very, very powerful. They've been degraded in sort of like the collective imagination, but originally the Elfa were, people will say, oh, you don't want to mess with fairies. the word fairy was used as a replacement for elf. You know, they're not that different. You know, they've got different etiquette, but they are just as powerful. And if you make them mad, you will know it. But they also will teach you things. You know, they will also, you know, if they like you and you have a good relationship with, you know, if you have allies among them, they will help you out with stuff. And then the final biggest influence is a more recent one. That is the soul lore, the heathen soul lore practice. That has completely changed how I see a lot of stuff. Like, I don't think we spend enough time thinking about what the soul or souls look like. And when you think about it, your souls are the machinery with which you work magic. You know, so the better you understand your souls, the more efficiently you can work magic. You know, and I kind of feel like, I mean, this past year of doing this work with the soul lore, it has been so changing. It has been really healing. It has been, I keep saying that, it's been very healing. But it's been very healing. It's helped me to find ways to work with my neurodivergence that I don't think I would have had otherwise. I've learned to identify, like, sort of differentiate between different sources of energy from different souls. I've learned which souls to work with the different types of magic. I've learned how to get counsel from my different souls as well. And also to work with my souls in a more, as a way of communicating with other people in a subtle way. So, you know, and that, I've only really experimented with my husband with this. I mean, nothing nasty. It's just kind of like hey, can you go suggest to his soul part like this that, you know, we should do blah, blah, blah if it's amenable to him? You know, it's nothing like I don't want him to have his free will. It's just about kind of like putting the idea in his head if it might sound good. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, I've done that, and then shortly after my husband suggested it, you know? So that's still kind of in the experimental phase. So I'm going to, like, the next stage is to widen my net out to see, you know, if it works with friends, and after that, if I can do it with strangers, and kind of go from there. So that's the three main influences.
I'm digging into that.
You so should.
I'm excited.
Like,
That's
it's a free
fascinating.
website. It's a free website. It is heathensoulor.net. Everything on there. This lady, Winifred Rose, who did all the research, she has it as books that you can buy as well, but it was important for her to put it out for free too, as an act of service, because she just wanted people to have it. She believes so much in the healing potential for, you know, the solar work, that she just wants it out there without, you know, necessarily glory for herself. And I think that's just amazing. You know, that's a real pack wolf behavior, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, I recommend her work as often as I can. It's been so changing. And I don't actually know whether I would be nearly as happy as I am now today without it. It's just hole making in the best way.
Neat.
So I'm just going to keep touting it.
Good.
I want everyone to be well.
Glad
and
I got
happy.
to hear about it.
I'll post a link in the email to you if you want.
Yes, please. Well, I wrote it down, so yeah, I would like that. Because I'm going to invite you to something after.
Ooh.
After this, I have something to talk to you about.
Oh, okay. Sounds cool.
What do you have any advice for a new witch? Words of wisdom.
Find a balance between listening to other people and their takes on stuff, and listening to your own instincts and what you're experiencing. That's I think one of the biggest challenges, you know, in a lot of ways, coming up in the 90s was hard, but it was also looking back, it was also really good because I got to figure out who I was as a witch before social media became big and before those kind of social pressures happened. And so I got to kind of shape myself more. And I see a lot of people, like new people, they'll go, they'll be on social media, they'll be asking lots of questions because naturally it's there, you can talk to all these people. But then, one, you're not necessarily putting in the practice, and you have to you have to do to be, right? You have to do to be, you have to do to write, you have to do to tell people. So the practice isn't necessarily happening, it's kind of getting shifted, like the practice is kind of shifted to aesthetic in a lot of ways and like talking about it.
Yeah.
But then they're also not necessarily getting to find their own relationships with beings and their own guides and their own experiences for themselves. And I think that's such a key part of being a witch. You've got to, like, when you look at the early modern period sources, the witches back then, they could be sitting in a garden and then this, fairy walks in. It's like, hey, you want to be a witch? And, usually a woman is like, hey, you're in, I'm in. Son of a bitch, I'm in, kind of thing. And then they learn from their familiars, like they went from there. So, it's good to have the extra voices, but it's also good to just kind of keep your own counsel too. And also, no book can fix your practice. That's a huge one. No book will ever, ever be a substitute and get you where you need to go more than practice. There comes a point where you just have to sit the hell down, suck it up, and do the damn exercises and do the work. And you'll never get there. And there's no product either. Don't even think you can buy a crystal or whatever that was going to fix it. It ain't. If you're not putting the work in, it's not. Crystals and all these other tools you can buy are great to help you as props, but they're not the core of everything. They're not the quick fix. And I think in the society that we are in, with it being like hyper-capitalist, there's always like this, get this product for better living, better living through aphamies, whatever. And I don't know if I pronounced that right. I've never been a Wiccan.
That's how I pronounce it.
Is it? All right, rock on. Better living through whatever. And so we've all kind of grown up in this environment of, there's a product for that. There's a product to fix this problem. And there isn't in witchcraft. Sure, you can get herbs that can help you with, like, herbs and salt if, like, you need to get rid of a spirit or whatever. But the fundamentals, you're never going to get the fundamentals unless you do the work. So, and I think that's a trap a lot of people fall into. And I see a lot of people fall into that trap. And then they don't progress, and then they just kind of peel off. They go out, or it becomes more of an aesthetic. And I've got friends who have been, like, calling themselves witches for years, and they don't do anything. They don't do any witchcraft. And they don't make the time to do any of the work in whatever form. And, like, we talked about consistency, the issues of consistency and, exhaustion and, like, not necessarily being able to do daily practices, but trying to at least get the practices in as best you can in the capacity that you have. Not everyone's got the same capacity either. Some people have got physical issues that make it harder. Some people have environmental issues. But doing what you can. If you're not doing what you can, then you're just not doing it. You're not it. You're not even sticking the feathers up your butt to call yourself a chicken at that point. So, yeah, we're in the mixed metaphors bit now. Welcome to the bad quotes and mixed metaphors section of the day.
So listen up, kids.
Listen up, kids. Make like a tree and fuck off. It's a Boondock Saints quote, right? Boondock Saints. The guy from a pub who mixes up his metaphors all the time. Then make like a train leave. Anyway, he's my icon.
Who would you like to see on the show answering these questions?
Okay, so I have a friend. I have two friends, but I don't know if one of them would come on. I have more friends than two, but these are the two that come to mind. Honest, I promise. So I think, I have a friend called Colleen Reese. She's not a writer, but she has some really interesting perspectives on stuff. I think people would probably really dig what she has to say. Great person as well. Irene Glass. She's the three people, honestly. So Irene Glass, she, like I said, she's a local. She lives not far from me. She heads up the local UU pagan. What do they call it now? Congregation. Yes, that's a churchy word, isn't it? Congregation. So she heads up the pagan congregation, and is also a rocking witch, and also a heathen too. And also, I have a friend called Daniela Sanina. She actually grew up learning how to be a fairy witch, fairy doctor from her grandmother. And she's from Romania. She asked me to endorse one of the books she's got coming out next year. And it was one of those books that when you've got a book published, then like people who've written books kind of in a similar field as you have, they'll hit you up and be like, hey, can you read this and let me know what you think?
A blurb?
Yeah, maybe write an endorsement for me that I can use. And I'm usually like, yeah, hell yeah, bring it on. So yeah, I would definitely, Daniela's book, I read it, and there was so much that I recognized in her practice, like so much of it that was so familiar. Obviously, I can't relate to growing up in Romania during a communist dictatorship, but the magical elements of it, for sure. Like, I got the feeling that me and Daniela could, even without having worked with each other before, we could easily get in the same ritual space and catch what the other is doing and work together pretty much seamlessly.
Cool.
She is awesome. And yeah, she's doing the rounds to promote her book, I think, right now. So she would definitely be up for going on.
Nice.
And she's one of those people who, like, I'll get something in a vision and then she'll message me, or she'll get something in a vision, I'll message her and I'm like, hey, have you seen such and such thing? And she'll be like, dude, I was going to message you about that. Or, she'll mention something that I had recorded in my journal but hadn't told her, but then she'll mention it and it's really niche. But then I'll be like, hey, you're not going to believe this, but this is a bit I didn't mention when I was telling you about this whole thing. Here's a bit of my journal showing you that I did write that down. So that's neat. We're both getting that thing. So she's, yeah.
It sounds like you should be working together.
Yeah, but there's like a few states between us. That's a little bit of a barrier. States are big things.
Yes. Especially out this way.
Well, especially out your way, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up? Or anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about? Or did you have any questions for me?
The only thing I want to bring up is... I do online classes in different... On the kind of like magic that I experiment with. Looking at everything from the history, the sources, the experimentation angles, the how to do it on a practical level, how to participate in these experiments. And I'm going to start doing them again. I've taken a little break. I'm going to start doing them again. I haven't decided yet what the first class of the year is going to be, but I am probably going to be getting into... I'm probably going to be running the Elf series again later this year, and that's going to go that's going to go all the way through about what elves are, elves and the relationship between elves and witchcraft in Old Norse sources and Old English sources, working with the old magical medical charms to sort of like deal with issues and do purifications, things like how to work with mugwort for fumigation. Like a lot of people think that you can only use white sage, but we actually have in Old English, we actually have sources that tell you how to prepare herbs for use as smoke fumigation. We have charms addressing herbs as people that you can then chant as well while working. So there's a lot of this stuff out there that I like to get out there just so that people know it's there. So I'm going to be doing that with the elves. I'm also going to be getting into the sort of like it's a filthy name of a class, but it really gets into sort of like these sexual associations between witches and elves. So a whole bunch of elf fuckery. That's what I'm putting down here. I'll probably run the fiber magic class again, which is spun magic, knitting magic, the sort of like use of wool in different magical traditions, knot magic, and the relationship between Sather and spinning. And finally, I'm probably going to be running my classes on burial mounds again, or a kind of updated class based on the experiments I've been doing. So there's probably going to be a whole lot more animism stuff coming out. I'm going to want to start putting out stuff about, the whole Wolf Age, Apple Age, all that kind of business. So there's a whole lot of stuff I've got going on in my head. I haven't got them nailed down yet. Just follow my Facebook page. I'll announce them there, and on my Instagram. And my blog, I'm currently in the middle of this big series on, traditionally in Heathenry, there's been this gulf between Reconstructionist methodology and what people called woo, or gnosis, or experience. And I've always kind of uncomfortably straddled the two because I never understood why they were apart. But as a neurodivergent person, I struggled to understand inferences. So it was actually easier for me to participate in Reconstructionist communities because they were more delineated what you could talk about. But while doing all these experiments and whatnot, having these experiences, and now thankfully we live in a much better time when we can talk about both these things together. So I'm doing this blog post series about how we can combine Reconstructionist methodology with gnosis to create workable modern versions of historically attested practices. And they may not be, exactly how people did back in the day. But my entire thing is I kind of see these practices as being almost like a seam of gold that you're trying to mine for. And even if we can't find the same mine to go down it the same way, we can try and dig our own mine. And then hopefully some being might take pity on us and help us get the rest of the way, and then we're back to the whole thing about being the sad, pathetic human that's trying to do things and beings taking pity on you. So I'm doing a whole blog series about that, and including that discussions about, the importance of being honest about what you experience, and also like how you disrespect your allies when you are not honest about where you get things from. Responsibilities to other people when engaging in this work, other humans, other, like the animal people in your lives as well, and then the unseen in your neighborhoods. So it's a huge series. It's an absolutely huge series, and you get to see me being my crash test dummy, magical crash test dummy self, explaining the madness. So if you're into that, if that sounds good, read it. It's probably going to be about 6 to 8 posts long, the way it's shaking out.
And there will be a link in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. There might be some rants sort of like mixed in, like rant posts if like stupid things happen and I just can't hold it in. But because that's always like a marker for me for like if I'm going to write a blog post. If I find myself doing something mundane and like normal, like cleaning the toilet and ranting to myself over it, I'm like, no, I've got to get this out. I've got to dump this into the world so other people can suffer too. Sharing.
Now at the end, I asked for
Yes.
2 things.
Oh.
One thing is, could you please recommend something, anything at all? Does not have to be witchcraft or religion or no, doesn't have to be related to that at all. Just recommend something to the listeners.
Recommend a thing to the listeners. Go outside. Go outside.
I agree.
Close your eyes. If you've ever felt a storm coming, you ever been able to feel that energy in the air? Try to feel it on a day when it's not storming. You know how it feels already, right? Try to feel it on a day when it's not storming. And then think about what that energy could be. I think it's the sort of atmospheric energy from like all the other beings that you live around. And doing that is one of the nicest things you can do when spring is coming. Just kind of like feeling that buzz of life growing. It just always makes you feel good. So I recommend doing that. And also try drawing your feelings. Something my therapist did last week because I struggled to describe feelings. And she led me through a mindfulness exercise. And she said, okay, get your art supplies and draw how it feels. And you don't have to be constrained by human shapes and forms. Okay? Just what imagery does it remind you of? And then just take a look at it and think, okay, what does that tell me about what's going on right now? What does that tell me about my needs? How can I integrate taking care of those needs into my self-care? So those are my recommendations. Just different ways to connect with yourself.
The second thing that I ask is, please tell me a story that you love to tell or that you love to hear. Preferably something that you would tell around a campfire or in a gathering of people you know really well and who know you.
Oh, God. I don't know. First I have to figure out the ones that won't get me arrested.
Also that.
I'm joking. I don't really have any that are going to get me arrested. So this is a really quick one, but I've been kind of thinking about it lately because somebody posted on Twitter about how this little girl in their class, they're a teacher, this little girl in their class saw a statue of Odin on a video and she was like, oh, I've got one of those at home. I asked him to take the nightmares away when I wake up with nightmares, and he does. And this person was like, I'm not sure, but I'm going to see if this kid actually knows who this god is. So she tells him and puts out a few details, and this kid's like, yeah, that's a guy. Anyway, it got me thinking about this one time when I was pregnant with my kid, and I'm walking down the aisle on one of my 50 million trips to the bathroom when I'm about to go home desperate. And so I'm there waddling along with my orange apron on, and I turn down this aisle, and there's this kid in a stroller, and the kid has to be like 2 or 3 years old at the most, and this kid just stares at me right away. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. And then all of a sudden, the kid leans forward and covers up one eye with his hand and stares at me.
Oh.
And I'm like, I felt my mouth drop. I mean, I've been worshipping the old man since, I've had oaths of the old man since 2005. So this was a highly significant event for me, you know, as random and weird as it was. And I'm just kind of like, what the, you know, and I kind of like walk around the kid, looking at the kid, and the kid's parents, like, is talking to an associate and just not paying attention. And I'm thinking, wow, that was really weird. So that's the only story I've got right now. I probably should have thought of one.
That's cool.
And
like weird. I love weird crap like that.
Stuff like that happens to me all the time.
Good.
You know, like
I love it. Well, I mean, maybe not
people
good for
follow
you,
my
but I enjoy
Facebook.
hearing about it.
People follow my Facebook and they're like, you know what? I've told my husband so many weird stories before we met, and he started to hang out with me. He's like, I thought you used to kind of, maybe you were sort of elaborating on things that happened. And then we had our first date, and we got followed by the Iraqi national soccer team in this random town in Korea. And we ended up in this juicy bar randomly that I didn't realize it was a juicy bar. And it was just this whole weird thing. And then things just got weirder as time went on. There's this one time when we got kicked off this mountain shrine after we saw these drunk guys mess up a chicken sacrifice. And, my husband in the end was just like, I didn't used to believe, I didn't think you were lying. I thought like you were maybe kind of elaborating on stuff, but after being around you, now there's just no doubt in my mind. It's actually weirder than what you say. I'm like, yeah, it's always been like this. the stuff that man has seen, the stuff that man has dealt with living with me, oh my god. He deserves a medal, honestly.
Well, thank you for being on the show and for sharing a lot of stories.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry if I talked your ear off a bit too much.
That's what this is for.
When I get going, I get going.
And thank you again, and I will see you probably over on Facebook. Bye.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Definitely look at. I'll send you that stuff, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Well, Kat, welcome to Patreon.
Oh, hello. Thank you. I'll try not to get too weird.
No, this is where you get extra weird.
Oh, I get extra weird here? Oh, God, I don't need that encouragement. We ended up sitting on the seat together, and it was fine, while we were in the harbour. And then we started getting out of the harbour, and all of a sudden it was like every time the boat dipped, it was like somebody threw a bucket of water in your face.
That sounds great.
It happened this time. Me and Morgan just burst out laughing. This woman started screaming in fear. So you had this woman screaming incessantly, boyfriend trying to calm her down. And then it got to a point where the boat was pitching so much that me and Morgan... To hear more of the Patreon episode, head over to patreon.com/CleverKimsCurios for a free 7-day trial. The monthly magic tier will give you access to the monthly magic Marco Polo group, the private Patreon Facebook group, access to the written monthly spells, and more. There are also tiers with just digital content, or you can get spell boxes, intentional handcrafted jewelry that I make especially for witches, and there's even a special crystal tier. Check it out at patreon.com/CleverKimsCurios. Thanks for listening to this episode of Your Average Witch. You can find us all around the internet, on Instagram at Your Average Witch Podcast, Facebook at facebook.com/YourAverageWitchPodcast, at YourAverageWitch.com, and at your favorite podcast service. Want to help the podcast grow? Leave a review. You can review us on Amazon and Apple Podcasts, and now you can rate us on Spotify. You just might hear your review read at the end of an episode. To rate Your Average Witch on Spotify, click the home key, click Your Average Witch Podcast, and then leave a rating. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to YourAverageWitchPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next Tuesday.